Brands have to be really clear about the use cases, understanding what it is they're trying to solve, which is if you're trying to solve a campaign problem, really going back to first principles and understanding it. Is it really the campaign tool that's the problem, or is it the underlying data that feeds your campaign tool or your MarTech stack or your ad stack?
Welcome to the Marketing Rapport, a podcast created for and by marketing professionals who seek to better understand their consumers and design unique, personalized experiences that stand out in today's market. In each episode, hosts from Verisk Marketing Solutions connect you to industry thought leaders, practitioners, and experts focused on improving B2C experiences through powerful data-driven insights. It's about how we connect with our consumers and where we can partner together to do it better. This is the Marketing Rapport.
Hello and welcome to our new and we think improved podcast. My name is Zora Senat and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Verisk Marketing Solutions, a newly formed business unit of Verisk. With the merging of Jornaya, Infutor, and Contact State, Verisk Marketing Solutions was created to help marketing leaders and the ecosystem partners who support them improve the reach, timing, relevance, and compliance of every consumer engagement. The end goal being to create exceptional experiences throughout the customer lifecycle. So, our podcast has taken on a new identity, which means we can safely assume some of you might be new listeners. We're by no means new to the podcast scene, so be sure to check out some previous episodes of both Jornaya Talks and Infutor's Identity Revolution, where we've had conversations with a variety of industry leaders and experts in data, technology, consumer identity, and everything in between. So let's get started. I'm eager to welcome industry leader Barry Padgett, CEO of Amperity. Barry, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today.
Pleasure, Zora. Glad to catch up. It's been a little while.
Wonderful. So excited to have you here. And to give a little background for our listeners, Barry joins us with over 20 years of financial and operational experience. Prior to his work with Amperity, he spent nearly 2 decades at Concur Technologies in various leadership roles across the globe in Asia, Europe, and the US. Following SAP's acquisition of Concur, he served as president of Ariba, Fieldglass, and Concur, which were collectively known as the Intelligent Spend Group. He also served as the chief revenue officer at Stripe. Did I miss anything?
No, it makes me sound really old when you put it that way.
It's quite the impressive rap sheet that you have, Barry. So you've had the opportunity to work with people all over the world, some really great companies, very impressive talent. So before I start to pepper you with the questions that I've prepared for this podcast, why don't you just give the audience a couple of highlights? Tell us a little bit about how you got here today.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think looking back, the master stroke of luck and genius was I decided to go and work for a startup in Brussels, Belgium after school. It was just 3 of us trying to build algorithms for banks, Swiss banks. And that was a total failure. But I'll tell you, that 1-year commitment turned into almost 20 years abroad, living and working in the Netherlands, Belgium, England, France, over to China, Singapore, Australia. Met my wife in Australia, who's a Kiwi from New Zealand. Our son was born in Australia. Our daughter was born in England. So, we had a wonderful time crisscrossing the globe. And really what it boils down to is this, Zora. When you are from all these different countries, as our family is, you kind of look like the Jason Bourne family. All of your passports are different colors. And there's no benefit because you end up standing in the longest line of every airport in the world. So, it's not all it's cracked up to be. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I understand. So, okay, here, I'll ask you one more question. So, favorite city in the world?
I would say favorite city in the world is the city I live in right now, Seattle, Washington. And I've kind of always been that way. Whatever city I'm living in is the best one at the time.
Where you chose it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I will say, there are different phases of your life where the available opportunities in a city kind of dictate where it falls in that list. So when I lived in Amsterdam, I was, a young man in my early 20s, and that's a wonderful place to live at that time. And my wife and our 2 kids recently visited Amsterdam again many years later, and I realized it's all cobblestone. It's really hard to push a stroller around. There's not that much green space available. And so it's not the best maybe place. Had I had young kids at the time, maybe I would have felt differently. So
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Chicago. Now the Chicago suburbs are my favorite place in the world with two toddlers. Okay, so let's dive into the questions here. Both of our firms specialize in identity or entity resolution. So how do we see brands going about solving this big messy problem of the unified customer profile? And why do you think so many companies have tried and failed at that endeavor?
yeah, I think there's a couple of things, and I think you and I probably see the world the same way, Zora. I think the two approaches that we see out in the wild, one, a brand buys a CDP, because if you think about CDP, customer data platform, seems like a no-brainer that you're going to get your customer data all cleaned up as part of that deployment. And I think in reality, what we see are, when you look at the CDP category, there's a concentration of companies and tools and platforms that skew really heavily to the marketing automation side of the house around activation and journey orchestration and campaign building and segmentation, but that ignore the fundamental and underlying problem of the data is super messy, and it's really hard to make those tools work the way they're designed to work unless you go and clean up the data first. And so many CDP companies kind of punt on this really tough problem of cleaning up the messy data. I think the second scenario is that you see brands, trying to build this themselves, either, utilizing something that they already have in house, or using some of the modern tech stack to try and figure out how to build this. And I think, cast your mind back 20 years ago, most companies tried to build their own CRM systems. Most companies tried to build their own billing systems. And fast forward to today, it's suicide to try to build your own CRM tool or your own billing system or insert the blank. And so I think in either case, brands have to be really clear about the use cases, understanding what it is they're trying to solve, which is, if you're trying to solve a campaign problem, really going back to first principles and understanding it. Is it really the campaign tool that's the problem, or is it the underlying data that feeds your campaign tool or your MarTech stack or your ad stack? And so I think in general, those are the two ways that we see brands out there trying to solve the problem. And I'm really excited because I think we're in the early innings of this transformation away from, building your own CRM or building your own billing system, to really taking something that's best in class, ultra modern, and not only solves the problem, but also takes care of some of the issue of, feeding your existing tech stack, feeding your existing MarTech stack or your ad tech stack, and making that perform in a way that it hasn't before. So, the answer doesn't necessarily have to be constantly go and try and digitally transform everything in your stack. Sometimes just cleaning up the data and feeding that stack better data yields incredible results.
Yes, the fundamentals are important. So as brands climb this maturity curve and start to transform their businesses to more digitized digital experiences, what role does the unified customer profile play? What the AMP ID, if you will, play in that digital transformation?
Yeah, I think such a good question. And this is one of those questions where it's like, even listening to myself say it in my head before I say it, the reaction is kind of like, duh. And by that I mean, personalization has become table stakes. Like, customers, we as consumers ourselves, expect the brands that we work with and that we, gift our money to, as if they're a well-known entity. We expect that, and it harms our view of the brand when we're served up with experiences or cross promotions that don't make sense in the context of what a brand should know about us. Like, why are they serving us up ads for things we've already bought? Why isn't there suppression built into their tooling? Why don't they understand that I buy a certain category and that's the category I'm interested in, rather potentially something randomly different? Like, if I'm buying, in my case, men's, dress shirts, why am I getting ads for, women's sportswear? It's really obvious, when it's email or ads being served up, it's clear that the brands don't know us, even though we've transacted with them for years and years, are part of their loyalty program, utilize every channel they have available. And so I think in some ways that's table stakes in terms of our expectations as a consumer, but most brands still have yet to achieve that. And so it's kind of like, duh, as a consumer, we expect that, but really difficult for the brands we love to actually get this fixed and get it cleaned. And I'd say, lastly, like, there are some there are some other benefits, like having the depth of insight into a customer means making better and smarter decisions driven by data science. So you're getting more for your ad spend and more for your loyalty program spending. It means happier employees, like the people that serve the customer who desperately want to serve up great experiences, and giving them the tooling and giving them the data to do that. And so it means that, and less time on tedious Q&A and data cleansing. So I think unifying customer data has far-reaching impact. It's certainly economics, for sure, profound. But in terms of how we think about the overall experience and the journey towards centricity and our own employees and their ability to delight customers, there's really never been a better time to get deep into the guts of finally unifying that customer profile.
I love where you took that answer around employee experience. It's clear Amperity, just in interacting with the team and the brand, it's very clear that there's an internal and an external experience that you're working very hard to maintain. So kudos to you. And I think some of the trends are kind of leading in that direction as well. So there are many signals that MarTech spending is going up and to the right, despite some uncertain economic indicators that are surrounding us. So what are the main problems that B2C brands are looking to solve with this increase in spend in platforms, in yours, but also in others?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably three things. One, which is the sort of ever-present need to go find new customers, and cost of acquisition of new customers is going up, not down. And so you should expect that we're going to spend more as marketers to go find new customers. I think secondly, in reaction to the cost of acquisition going up, we're seeing, more companies spend more programmatically to retain their existing customers. It's sometimes, less expensive to retain a customer and upsell and expand that relationship than it is to go acquire a brand new one. And so you're seeing a lot of spend around making sure that our existing customers are happy, that they understand the full breadth of our services and the scope of our product suite, and are getting the most out of us as a brand. And then I think secondly, you're seeing a lot of spend and interest right now in reaction to the cookie going away, the mobile ad ID going away. I don't think anybody has a crystal ball that exactly predicts what's going to happen next year when that occurs. But there is a scramble happening within the world's brands to establish a first-party data graph, right? Understand who their customers are. You can't rent your customer base anymore from a third party. You're going to have to know who your customers are, and then you're going to have to go target lookalikes to your activation channels based on the attributes and based on the customer personas that you now know, since you've got a customer 360 for the first time. So I think you're seeing brands, spend on that in reaction to what's happening. And it's a great catalyst for finally going and really owning your own first-party information and your own first-party data, which many brands just have had on the list for a long time, but not necessarily gone and done something about.
Right. But theoretically, the return on ad spend is there, right?
Yeah,
Better
for
360 sure. Return on ad spend is there.
For sure.
All right. So let's get into an example here. So can you share a customer or example around some of these things that we're talking about here?
Yeah, one of the stories I like best, because it has a really cool employee angle, which isn't something that often gets talked about. You and I just briefly mentioned it. Brooks Running. I'm a runner myself, so I've always appreciated Brooks and their maniacal focus on the runner, and staying in that one lane and doing it exceptionally well and better than anybody on the planet, in my opinion. The CMO there, Melanie Allen, has a really, I think, fantastic philosophy around marketing as a CMO. And that is that it's her expectation that she is going to engage and is responsible for engaging and driving customer experience no matter the interaction. And by that, I mean, an example would be at Brooks, when someone calls the support team there for help or opens up a chat session with someone in support, Melanie feels like, as the CMO, it's her responsibility to help make sure that engagement, although it's completely outside of marketing, is as delightful as possible and is returning on the brand promise to their runners and to their athletes. And so they have their unified view of the customer integrated into every system, every tool, every team that engages a customer. And in this particular example, I think they use Zendesk maybe. And so prior to implementing a 360, the customer service rep at Brooks, when you would call in, would pull up your name, maybe ask you your phone number, ask you for some details, and they would see your past case history, right? The last time that you called in with a problem, or if you had never called, they wouldn't know anything about you. But by integrating the 360 information into Zendesk, the customer service rep is still in the Zendesk UI, but they're now seeing your loyalty status, all your past transactions, behavioral info, next best product, anything that revolves around you and your interaction with Brooks. And so we get these awesome quotes from the customer service reps saying things like, "I'm closing cases before the customer can fully explain what their problem is." And it is such an empowering, amazing statement for what is maybe, arguably not the highest profile job at most companies, right? Answering the help desk phones, but turning those jobs into really high reward, high delight oriented, engagement opportunities for the company. And so now when you call the help desk, it's like, "Hey, Zora, thanks for calling. Like, looks like you bought 2 things and you returned one of them last week. You're probably calling to see where that refund is. It's going to hit your card next Tuesday. Looks like you bought a large and a medium. You returned the medium. Did you have a question about sizing on that item? Can I get you to talk to somebody who's an expert in that area?" I mean, they're potentially turning what are negatively fueled interactions, "Where's my money? Where's my refund?" into something incredibly delightful and potentially even a sale. And it's like that sort of opportunity that Melanie thinks about, constantly delighting and engaging and knowing that customer at a granular level, and then pushing that out to everyone and every organization, every tool, every platform that they purchase and deploy. And I just love that story. And I just think as marketers, us having that broad sort of visibility and philosophy around every engagement, every touch point being an opportunity as opposed to someone else's problem is awesome. And Melanie's leading the way.
That reminds me, I just listened to another podcast, and the author's name escapes me, but the book was Black Goldfish, but it wasn't Black Goldfish. It was one of the other goldfish. Anyway, he's talking about, brands never meet customer expectations. They either fall short of customer expectations or they exceed them. So that's a wonderful example, and brought that back to me. So let's switch gears a little bit. Amperity's platform, you're servicing businesses internationally. You personally have a very international background, having worked all over the world. So how does the US market compare to other regions, particularly as it concerns data consumption and identity resolution? And I'm going to venture a guess at what your response might be, but I'll let you I'll let you react to that question.
Yeah, I will say it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag. I will say that, if you take the sort of global brands out of the equation for a moment and you just talk about national or local brands, in some ways, international markets have it a little easier in the sense that they serve a smaller market. They have a smaller population of potential buyers, and that's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is them, a little easier to know them. And the curse is you gotta figure out how to grow your company with a smaller sort of complexion of potential customers. And so when you think about mass automation, there may be an opportunity to do some things internally using everyday tools when your customer base is able to be managed in the size of a spreadsheet as opposed to an AI based cloud data warehouse. And so in some ways, those national brands have an opportunity in that they can know their customers a little more deeply because there's just fewer of them. On the flip side, I would say, they have both an opportunity given what we see with GDPR in Europe in terms of it's a catalyst to go and do something, and they have to finally, whether they were going to or not, they have to start figuring out, access and opt-in rights and make sure that they're serving the right customers and they have permission to do so. That's a great catalyst for companies like yours and mine in terms of finally bubbling our project up to the number one position. And at the same time, it's a real headache. You didn't have this in your top 5 things to do, and as a marketer, you're becoming frustrated about your ability to create campaigns and activate those campaigns and engage your audience and go find new audiences, and it can be a real hindrance. And so I would say in general, it's a mixed bag. You see, companies in Australia, for example, going really fast, early adopters of most technologies. This one is no exception. And so it's a wonderful market to go and work in. Companies that are operating in Japan, see opportunity here. Once Japan's a wonderful market. As soon as you have one great name, it makes it a little easier to open doors across the market. You can go actually quite fast, even though that first logo might take you a long, long time. And then across Europe, you're seeing, I think, as I mentioned, both these national brands opening up into cross-border opportunities to expand that sort of customer population and the potential customer population, but dealing with GDPR, dealing with Brexit, and making it really hard on marketers. And so it's a mixed bag, I would say, which isn't a great answer to your question.
Definitely. It was somewhat expected. I wasn't anticipating the kind of the tightness of the market to really be an influencer of where Amperity goes next. So any markets that you're looking to penetrate now and in the near future that can fall into that category?
Great question. We just opened our offices in London last month, and our offices in Melbourne, Australia last month as well. So we've been serving customers in both geographies for a while, but finally putting some boots on the ground and starting to expand locally, which will be primarily to serve local brands more organically. So we've had a really a wonderful run serving big global brands that do business in multiple geographies, multiple regions, but we want to make sure now that we're able to support local brands too. And so we're excited about that.
Awesome. All right. So look into your crystal ball. What do you see coming in the future? What should brands be thinking about as we wrap 2022? Can you believe we're wrapping 2022 and move toward and think toward 2023 and beyond?
There's so many steps along the path to getting to whatever the there is in this space. And so if you're a brand that still is dealing with really messy customer data and finding it hard to get access to data in a time frame that's easy, being able to federate that out to the teams that need it, being able to integrate that to the tools that you have, then the crystal ball might just be solving your unified customer view over the next year or two. And that would be an incredible step forward for a lot of companies. I think for companies that have already solved it, we're seeing our existing customers lean into some of these things like clean rooms and retail media networks. One of the things that happens once you have this first party data graph of your customers is you can start to think about ways in which that data privilege creates opportunity. And so we've got retailers who are working with their suppliers to create clean rooms where they can start to create retail media opportunities and activation opportunities in the face of the cookie going away and the mobile ad ID going away. And so you're finding big box retailers who traditionally, have operated in the small single digit margin world, moving into these 80 and 90% margin retail media businesses, which is fantastic for the supplier because these big box retailers are uniquely placed to tell you what is likely to happen with your potential customer and when it's likely to happen. And so it's kind of a win-win-win. You think about the customer, the supplier, and the retailer. And then we're seeing companies come together who have an affinity in terms of they work with the same kind of customer and share, PII redacted data in a clean room tenant such that they can derive insights, they can figure out how they, drive customers to one another's loyalty programs, how they deliver a more unified experience for that joint customer. And so that's a direct response to the cookie going away and the mobile ad ID going away is, instead of depending on just Google and Facebook, they're going to start to self-medicate here and find, less expensive and potentially more engaging ways to interact with potential customers and existing customers. And the beauty of that is it's kind of this holy grail of finally closing the loop, being able to engage a customer and then have that return piece of information, which is how did they react? What did they do? And that seems to go missing when we just throw it over the fence and kind of spray and pray and hope for great results. So working with other companies and jointly delivering customer experience, I think is where we'll start to see more companies leaning over the next couple of years. But of course, the prereq is that you get your customer data fixed up and get it in an accessible, digestible, federatable format so that you can actually go do things with it.
I love how you ended that with, I heard creative and strategic partners, like-minded partners, which is how our two organizations came together in the first place several years ago. So, wonderful note to end on. I'll ask you one last question. Where can our listeners go to hear more from you and more from Amperity?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the partnership that we had with Infutor and now with Verisk. Really excited about everything that Verisk is doing on this front. And the easiest place to find me is, LinkedIn or on the Amperity website, and checking out our blogs and lots of thought leadership pieces. And I'm super easy to find and eager to engage and interact if I can be helpful to anybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We can't wait to catch up with you in the future to see what new and exciting things Amperity is up to. With that, I want to thank all of our listeners and invite you to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes as we continue to dive into trends, data, technology, and of course, marketing. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Marketing Report. This show is brought to you by Verisk Marketing Solutions, an organization created to help CMOs and their partners improve the reach, timing, relevance, and compliance of every consumer engagement. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the Marketing Report wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the show notes for more information.